she was every day. Well, I saw through that, and I just showered her with kindness and understanding and love. Well, she and my daughter were the same age, and she started coming home with me every weekend. Every summer she spent at my house. School days, nights, she stayed at my house because her mom knew that she'd be at school the next day because, that's where I was heading. Helped her with her homework. And she wasn't easy. She really wasn't. She wasn't an easy child to love. Until I realized that every time I had to call CPS as her teacher, what she was going through, I had no clue. Then we kind of lost touch. And during this time, I did not know that she was living in a car, living outside somewhere, couch surfing. That's what I heard the term was called nowadays, where you just sleep with whatever friend will take you in for the night. Well, she got her GED, and she called me when she said, I got into college. And she was admitted into college at Commerce, A&M Commerce. And then she called me first when she graduated. I was there at her graduation with honors. Woo. Then she called me and she goes, Miss Henson, I got accepted to do the master's program. Wow. So, and then she graduated with her master's. I'm so proud because that's as much as I have. I just have a master's. And so I am really proud to introduce a true success, a true life success story. Allison Kane Hagan.
Y'all bear with me for just a second. I didn't know she was going to do that.
No, we surprised you.
That was my one constant in my life. When Carmen asked me to come, I was really excited, and the closer it got, I was nervous. And now I'm crying. Thanks, Miss Henson. My name's Allison Avian. I graduated from NTCC in 2013. Then I transferred to Texas A&M University, where I received my bachelor's degree in social work. And then I was accepted into the master's program and received my master's degree in social work with a minor in criminal justice. And I graduated with honors. I was a single mom while I did it. And I am also a licensed chemical dependency counselor in the state of Texas. I work at the Northeast Texas Child Advocacy Center in Winsboro, where I'm the MDT coordinator for 8 counties. And I work with law enforcement, child protective services, and prosecution in the investigation and prosecution of severe child abuse cases. When we grow up, we reach milestones in our life, and we remember those milestones. First time you drive a car, first day of high school, first kiss, first date. And they're pretty memorable. I mean, firsts are always memorable parts of your life. That goes the same for the first night that you realize that you're homeless. The first time you realize you're homeless, those feelings of fear and uncertainty, it's something that you'll never forget. Almost 40% of the homeless people in the United States are under the age of 18, and I was one of them. When I was 12 years old, I told my mother something that I took every ounce of courage for me to tell her. I had been sexually abused by a grandfather. And when I told her, instead of being told, or getting that comfort and that mothering that a mother should do, I was told that I was a liar and that I was ruining her life and I was to never speak of it again. So that pretty much started the downward spiral in my life. I never spoke of it again, but it was too late. The damage had been done. I was berated daily. I was told that I was worthless. I was told that I ruined her life. and I was told that she should have had an abortion with me. I can still remember. It's funny what you remember and what you don't. It was Tuesday. It was in September. It was in 2002, and I was 16 years old. I was working at Catfish King, and I had to walk home. We lived about half a mile, if that, from Catfish King, but I had to walk home. And it was about 10 o'clock. I got off at 9:30, and so I walked home. And I was literally, physically, and forcefully removed from my mother's house. She threw me out physically into the yard and locked the door. I can't tell you why she did it. Still this day, I have no idea what set her off. I cried and I begged, and it seemed like hours. It wasn't, I'm sure it wasn't, but for her to let me back in. And then I started walking. I didn't have a car. So I walked to Delwood Park here in Mount Pleasant. It's about a 15-minute walk from where we live. And I got underneath the awning and sat on the picnic table, and I sat there until it started getting light out, thinking, okay, I'll go home. Things will be better in the morning. They weren't. The high key was gone, and all of my stuff was in trash bags on the front porch. It's really tough to describe the first night that you sleep on the street, because the fear and everything running through your head is paralyzing. You ask yourself why you are in that situation. I was 16 years old. The circumstances were beyond my control. And there are times in your life when your life is not in your hands. It's just simply not. But no matter what circumstances happen in your life, it doesn't define who you are. I spent almost 3 years as a homeless youth. I had friends that helped me. And the first thing that I realized and I noticed is when you're homeless, you become invisible. And you do that to yourself, because if you're invisible, then you're not stirring the waters and you're not drawing attention to yourself, because attention leads to questions. So I made sure that I didn't draw attention to myself. I would rather be on the street and know that my little brother and little sister were at home. But if too many questions got asked, and CPS got involved again, because I was a frequent flyer. My family was a frequent flyer in CPS. But if they took my brother and sister, then they would end up in foster care. And my mom didn't have a problem showing them love and affection. But for whatever reason, I didn't get that. I continued to worked at Catfish King and go to school. I had a friend that let me stay on her couch. I'd stay there. I'd stay at another place. Just until parents started asking questions. And if they started asking questions, then I left. Or they told me to go home. I didn't have one. Whenever I'd get off work at Catfish King, I would walk to Whataburger. Wasn't too far of a walk. And I'd do my homework. And then I'd walk around Walmart. The one good thing about Walmart is they don't close. And if you don't cause trouble, they don't tell you to leave. I did have a couple ask me why I was there so often, but they let me be. There was a few times when I didn't have a place to stay that I would stay at Delwood Park. But for the most part, I had friends that would either sneak me into their house, or I had one really good friend that lived right around the corner, actually, that would let me sleep in her barn until her mom went to sleep, and then she'd sneak me in and set an alarm, and I'd be out before her mom woke up. She'd let me take a shower. She'd tell me to wash my clothes. I eventually started picking up extra shifts at work. Extra shifts made sure I had money. And I was able to buy a car. And it was a piece of junk. It was. $900. Had no AC, it had no air, had a hole where the radio used to be. The lining was falling apart, had holes in it. There was no back seat. The back seat was just gone. And the driver's side door only opened from the outside. And there were many times it didn't want to start. I didn't have a driver's license because my mom didn't think that I needed one and refused to let me get one at the age of 16. I actually did not get my first legal driver's license until I was 24 years old. Yeah, I didn't have a driver's license, But I had a car, and a car meant that I had a roof over my head, even if it leaked. Bought my car, I continued to work, and there were times that I didn't have money. I had a checking account. I wrote 2 bad checks for food. One was for $4.74 at an Easy Mart, and one was for $11, just so that I could eat that night. Both of those are still on my record to this day. I was charged with a crime of moral turpitude, stating it'll forever be on my record. I was charged with theft, paid the restitution, paid the fine, but it still follows me to this day. And I got to thinking, I was sitting there one night in my car, and I realized I couldn't do it anymore. It led me to dropping out of school. There was no way that I could survive and still go to high school. It's hard enough to go to high school whenever you have a stable environment, when you have a mom or a dad or just a roof over your head. But when you have that instability, when you're that vulnerable at that age, both mental and physical instability, it's a recipe for disaster. So I dropped out of school. And then I realized I was becoming just like my mother, because she only had a 10th grade education. And at that point, I refused to be a statistic. Refused. I got my GED. I scored high enough on my GED that I was inducted into the National Honor Society of Adult Education here at NTCC. I had been told for so long that I was worthless, that I was never going to amount to anything, that I was stupid, and that I should have been aborted as a child. And I was set out to prove her wrong. I got my first apartment the day after I turned 18, because they won't rent to you until you turn 18. Trying to think where I was going with that, sorry. I think the hardest part of being homeless for me was not having anybody care if I was okay. I had one person, Miss Henson, but I didn't tell her that I was homeless because I was ashamed of a circumstance that was beyond my control. And I'd go see her, and she never knew otherwise. And I told her I was going home, and at that point she didn't know that home was wherever I parked my car. But I refused to be a statistic, and I got my first apartment. I worked 2 jobs. And then I found myself married, and I had 2 little boys. But that marriage failed because I didn't let anybody in, because the one person that was supposed to be there for me kicked me out and didn't care if I had clothes, if I had a roof over my head, if I had food in my belly. Refused to accept parental responsibility. And then after I graduated with my GED, and I was accepted into the bachelor's program, and I graduated with the bachelor's, and I had 2 little boys standing in the crowd, and whenever I walked across the stage, I heard them say, "That's my mama." That was my driving force. So I went and got my master's degree. And then I started letting people in, because I realized that those circumstances were beyond my control. If you don't take anything with you tonight, take this. Homelessness and all the negative stigmas attached to it. When you think of homelessness, automatically you think of drugs, you think of substance abuse, you think of lazy. And that's not always the case. I have an awesome husband that supports me every day in all of my crazy endeavors. Anytime I want to go back to school or I want to do something, he supports me. And that's lack of support, lack of anybody caring for you. It's beyond your control. And if you're a teenager and you have nobody, it affects you long term. But take this with you. Homelessness does not define a person's character. It does not define their ability. It merely defines their circumstances. Where I came from does not define me. But where I am is because of where I came from. Thank you.
She never told me when she was homeless. And when I heard about it, I was so upset. I am so proud.
And this is actually Allie's first time sharing her story. And we are so proud of you, Allie. You are truly an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much. This is just the beginning. Our next speaker is Mr. Eric Berger. He is the Executive Director of Highway 80 Rescue Mission in Longview, Texas, which is actually the closest homeless shelter we have, which is approximately 55, 60 miles from here. So please welcome Mr. Berger.
Good evening. Well, I know why you're quiet, okay? I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to tell you a lot of stuff that you just heard in ways that you're going to remember for a while, right? You know, one of the things that I want to talk to you about is when you think of homeless, what is your perception? So first of all, where do perceptions on homelessness come from? Somebody tell me. Shout it out. Media. So TV shows, right? So crime dramas. What's your anybody NCIS? Okay, how about what's the New York ones? Law and Order. Any Law and Order folks?
SVU.
Okay, Law and Order is the one I like to pick on. Okay, because where's Law and Order? It's in New York City, right? So the scenario is, hey, they're investigating the crime, right? And at first they think the homeless person is the person that did the crime. Does this scenario sound familiar? Then they kind of realize that the homeless person is a witness, but they're concerned because the homeless person isn't going to be reliable. Okay? And the homeless person that they're picking to be in this 1 hour crime drama is going to be what? Mentally ill, be a drug addict, okay, going to be drunk, going to look like what? They're either going to be a bag lady or a guy with a beard, right? Okay? And so that's the image that's put forward. They don't pick the single dad who's working 2 jobs, that in between going to the shelter, to the trade school, to his job, witnesses the crime. That's not who gets picked in that TV show. Why not? Because it doesn't fit. And I understand why, okay? Hey, they would have to explain, because that person wouldn't look homeless, okay? That person doesn't fit into telling the story. But the challenge is, if that's where your perception comes from, what do you miss? So where else do your perceptions come from? Where else? Two? Yeah. Experiences. So if you've met somebody that's homeless, if you have somebody in your school, and that would give you an experience. But there's also some that are maybe a little bit, are experiences were from the distance. Anybody know what I mean by that? What do you see somebody with a sign? What does that tell you? Is that person holding a sign that says, we'll work for food? You know, in Longview we have those folks, and I don't know most of them. I always go and I talk to them, but I find a lot of times, when I really start talking to them, I realize that they're not actually homeless. They're staying in motels, and they're not ready to make some changes in their life. But the average sign person, sometimes up to $250 a day. So if I have an experience with that person, and I say, hey, let me go take and get you a job, because they say we'll work for food, and they say no, then my perception might be that all of the homeless are doing what? Same thing. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that your view of all of homelessness is based on what you saw on TV from Law and Order, or your experience with somebody with a sign. That's going to give you a warped view, right? So where else do you get perceptions? So, how many come into Longview? Ever been down Highway 80? Ever been in front of the McDonald's on Highway 80? What do you see there? His name is Mike. And Mike is out there most of the time. And Mike is mentally ill. And we've tried to get Mike to come in. And that's one of the real challenges is it makes perfectly good sense to Mike that he's out there. Okay? And we've tried everything to get him to come in. And because he's not a danger to self or others, the mental health authorities won't do anything. And so Mike exists. But when you look at Mike, he clearly has an appearance of homelessness. And so there's a truth to that. But last night we slept 220 people at Highway 80 Rescue Mission. You know that we're not the only shelter in Longview? That there's almost 400 beds just in Gregg County, homeless beds. We have about 220 of them. Okay? Out of that 220, 35 to 40 every night are children. If you drive behind the mission at night, you would be amazed at how many company vehicles that you see behind the mission. See, your perception would be is that homeless are what? Unemployed. 60% of the people that we are working with have jobs. Those company vehicles you'll see behind the mission. Now they might be working 2 part-time jobs. They might not be working the job that they need to have. They maybe have had a crisis where it was a 2-income family and they lost one. They might be in a situation. One of the things I see happening in your area all the time is somebody who lives up here but works in Longview and the engine to their car blows and they have to make a choice. Do I pay rent or do I get the car fixed? And so they move into the shelter so they can be closer to work, so they can pay. And so what I want to share with you a little bit is be careful that the perceptions of homeless do not give you the whole story. And that doesn't mean there isn't some truth. Do we have folks that have alcohol and drug issues at the mission? You bet. But that's not the whole picture. And that most of the people who are homeless, don't wear a sign that says they're homeless. You wouldn't recognize them. And that's what your speaker talked about, being invisible. You know, I always get a kick out of people want to come and find where the homeless are. And I'm kind of sitting going, you're working next to them. They're in school next to you. They're your neighbors next to you. You don't necessarily have to come to the mission to find where the homeless are. When I first started working in missions, it was at the Union Gospel Mission in Seattle, Washington, a 700-bed shelter. And for the most part, everybody looked like the stereotype. It was all 55-year-old alcoholics, and most of these guys had either been in the military, had a trade, had a family. Most of them even had a church background, but slowly but surely, alcohol had taken over their lives, and their biggest challenge is they didn't believe that they could change. And when they made changes in their life, you didn't have to go and teach them how back to go to work. And they were all kind of the same. Today, when you walk through our facility, the diversity is all over the place. It used to be that the first thing we saw for every 55-year-old alcoholic, we would say we now had a 17-year-old kid. We are now close that there are more people under 30 at the mission than over. That is a major trend. One of the real challenges is we now have a number of young moms. Most of the moms that are with us have multiple kids and they're under the age of 25, and 60% of them do not have a GED. And so they're kind of going, hey, I need to earn more money, but they're in a limited situation. We've got high school kids that are staying at the mission as adults. You know, we have this mindset sometimes, okay, they must be rebellious. And you just kind of heard the story. It's the other way around. Mom finds a new boyfriend. The 16-year-old is out. Too old to go into foster care. And they're staying as a high school student at the mission. That doesn't fit the stereotype. Now, as diverse as our population is, age, race, background, one of the other misnomers that I think that I hear a lot of is that people who are homeless came from multi-generational poverty. And that, we have that group, but I'm going to tell you, we got all kinds of homeless that were making good money last year and aren't making it this year. So, once again, there's a great diversity. What I would say is that people fall into two main groups that we're working with. And that is the majority of the people, and this is the thing I'd really like you to hear, the majority of the people that we're working with are having a crisis. So they're having a temporary crisis. If I help them out with that, they can get beyond homelessness. And I would argue that a lot of these people, if other people had came alongside them and helped them before that crisis got out of control, they might have never came to the shelter. And so my example of that temporary crisis is you got that single mom who has lost a job. And she's hoping she's going to get the other job, but in the meantime, the rent starts to come due. And the landlord doesn't want to put her out, and she tells her, you know, I got an interview next week, if you'll just give me 3 more days. Well, 3 more days ends up into a month, ends up into 2 months, and he didn't want to put her out. But by the time he does, he evicts her and she owes 2 months. She goes to a friend's house, and I just need 3 days. Well, in the meantime, she couldn't pay the insurance on the car, and so she gets this ticket for driving without insurance. And then she's got the warrant for this. And so then when she gets finally the interview for the job that's going to work, that's going to get her out of this situation, guess what happens? She can't get the job because she's got an active warrant. And all it came back to when she lost that job, if she could have gotten another job in a faster period of time. And she waited too long to come to us. That's one thing we encourage people is don't wait to come into us. Doing so much to not be homeless that all these things start to stack up. Well, that's an example of somebody having a temporary crisis that can grow into a bigger one. Illness is a big one. If you get sick, what happens? That can be one of the first things that happens if you get sick for an extended period of time. What happens? You can't go to where? Can't go to work. Can't go to work. What do? What else comes when you don't have a job? What goes away with that? The insurance. If you don't have an income, what also goes away from that? You can't pay your rent. So if you end up in the hospital for an extended period of time, and then you get released, and you still need a month recovery, and you've already lost your place, and you can't get a job because you've still got an extended recovery, where do you go? Now, if you got family, that's great. But I'm going to tell you, we live in a world that the depth of family isn't always there for everybody. And so that's somebody that, hey, if I can help you get better, if I can help you get medication you can afford, if we can work with you on a plan to make sure you're getting better as fast as you can, I can help you get out of the homelessness. So those things with breaking down the cars, having it where you've got those temporary crises, the majority of the people we serve are having those issues. The people we spend the majority of our time with, and are the folks that maybe you see going down the street and say, ah, that's a homeless person, are the people that their life is a crisis. You guys get the difference on that? And so they've got some chronic issues in their life that until they address those issues, they're going to stay homeless. It doesn't matter how much food or shelter that we work with. So those folks that have alcohol and drug issues, that those folks who have a mental health issue, that those folks who their criminal record has kept them in a certain situation, until you work on resolving that issue, they're going to stay in homelessness. The good news is we can work on helping people have victory in those areas. But it's one of those things that until we understand that, if I just take and only deal with the physical and don't give you an opportunity to deal with the core issues, then how do I help you get past homelessness? And so that's one of the things. We have a Christian-based alcohol recovery program on site. We're working, trying to get people into mental health services. All of those things we work with, and we've seen great success in people making those changes in their life. But it's the understanding of, hey, if you got your life is a crisis, we need to make sure we address those issues. But one of the things that I see often is the majority of the people are having temporary crises, but sometimes they're the ones that get overlooked because they don't seem to be homeless. We really challenge our staff, because the people that their life is a crisis, the ones we know better, because we're dealing with them all the time. And there are other folks that you heard the term invisible. We have to work to make sure we're staying engaged with them. So I want to just give you a couple of challenges. One, be guarded about perceptions. Not that there isn't some truth, but I'm telling you the homeless world is much bigger than what you see, is much closer, not just something in Longview, much closer than what you see. Beware of that diversity. But also, be involved. We have 1,500 volunteers that help at Highway 80 Rescue Mission. Isn't that exciting? But here's the challenge. You know what they all want to do? They want to serve food. Remember I told you about those 35 kids that are staying at the mission? You know how many volunteers that we have come weekly that mentor and commit to time to be with those kids? 2. Because that takes a weekly commitment.